This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today on the show, I am honored to have retired Army Colonel Christopher Kolenda, and he is the founder of Strategic Leaders Academy, and he's helping leaders like us become better leaders. And he wrote a book about it called Leadership, The Warrior's Art, which we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be talking about some other things that Chris has done throughout his career to help others become better leaders. With all that being said, Chris, welcome to the show.
John, thanks. It's delightful to be here.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got started, what your career has been like going from West Point all the way to where you are today, and what is it that you guys are doing today?
Oh, sure. I wanted to go to college on a baseball scholarship. And the day I graduated high school, I got a phone call from the senator's office saying, "You've been accepted to West Point. Would you like to go?" And I said, well, if I don't go, I'll always wonder what it was like. But if I do go and I don't like it, I can always leave. So I guess I should go and see what it's like. And so, 17-year-old decision-making process. I went to the academy and I really liked it. I was bullied in high school pretty badly, and being at the academy, being at West Point, it was something, I could do. I found out I could do it really well. I could do Army really well. And I could also put myself in a position to help prevent others from going through the same things that I went through. And so it did a lot of very positive things for me. I went into the Army with an open mind, and I absolutely loved it. I did that for 24 and a half years, to include multiple deployments in Afghanistan. I led 800 paratroopers in Afghanistan, and you can read about our experience there in Jake Tapper's best-selling book, The Outpost. We occupied about the middle of that book, and a lot of folks said it was the only time in a 20-year history of the war where a large insurgent group was motivated to stop fighting and eventually join the government. So we feel very proud about that outcome. And then I was asked by the Secretary of Defense to be senior advisor and to them, and to be their personal representative in talks with the Taliban. So I've gotten also good at figuring out how to work with people that you don't necessarily like. And then in 2014, I resigned from the government and decided to start my own business, helping leaders to be more awesome, helping teams to be more awesome. So I like to help leaders be the best versions of themselves, help them to build winning teams, high-performing teams, and to make the pivotal decisions that help their businesses soar to new heights. So that's what I do now.
Awesome. So what have you taken from basically from what you've learned being a military leader, and how closely does that align with like corporate America and in helping leaders in business today?
There are some things that are very closely aligned and some things that couldn't be further apart. And so it's always a buyer beware scenario.
Yeah.
In terms of the things that are alike, you're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's what leadership is about, is inspiring people to contribute their best to your team's success. And so the principles about how you deal with people, how you are self-aware, how you build great teams, how you make decisions. I mean, those are all very, very similar. They rhyme. The context is different, but the lyrics rhyme. There are also some things that, of course, are very different. In the military, you've got people who've taken an oath and are willing to put themselves into harm's way. You don't have that in corporate America. In the military, you have people who have been willing to put themselves through some sort of basic training where they learn about the expectations in the military sense of the common good. You have people who've bought into that. You don't have that advantage in corporate America. You got all sorts of, in the military, you've got, Navy SEALs and all of these people from elite units who have talked about how you build great teams. Well, it can be a little bit easier when you're trying to build great teams from people who have already self-selected as great teammates. In most of the military and most of corporate America, you are dealing with your A players, your B players, your C players. And I think the challenge of being able to build a great team out of ordinary people is a much different challenge than building great teams out of elite athletes. So those are some of the similarities and some of the differences. And I think it's important to keep both in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I found that a lot of the things that I've had several military leaders on, from Navy SEALs to colonels and captains in the Navy and things like that on, and you hear a lot of the things that are similar when it comes to this. And I like the fact that you're breaking out the things that are different as well, because sometimes we lose sight of that fact that people have made a pledge to be there, and they're there because they have belief in the fact that the country and what they're doing is greater than their individual self. And we don't have that for businesses, right? You're not gonna we don't have that same loyalty level that you may have in the military. So sometimes
Right. And I think it's a huge,
that.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And there's a lot of obsession about the why.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could just have this mystical why that suddenly inspires everybody to want to work 20 hours a day and give up their entire lives for the success of my business, and people spin themselves into knots over it. And first of all, that just simply doesn't exist. It's a pipe dream. But second, it's actually much easier to achieve what you want to achieve, which is connect people's work to what's important to them and connect what's important to them to their work. And if you can do that, and you can, that just basic clarity, you're going to be off to a great start in terms of people wanting to be a part of your business and wanting to stick around.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think, there's different ways of doing that, of building that, what people respect and what they want into their job. But what are some of the ways that you found, looking like, I know in your book, you talk a lot about historical leadership and you mentioned, the importance of character when it comes to like Alexander the Great and things like that. What are some ways that we as leaders can take some of the history lessons that we've learned about great historical leaders and use that in business to help people get that connection from the things that they care about to the work that they're doing?
Yeah, thanks, John. And I'd like to sort of zoom out a little bit in terms of how we get better as leaders, how we improve as leaders, and it'll give you the sort of rationale behind why I wrote the book the way that I did. I think you improve leadership when you work from when you have three legs of a stool, if you will, and those three legs are theory. You got to have ideas about leadership. History. So you've got to see what's worked in the past, because oftentimes past is prologue. And then third, you've got to have experience. You've got to actually be in the arena doing it and learning from others who are in the same arena as you. And those, each of the three legs are vital. If you have the experience or if you have the history and you have the theory, but you don't have experience, you're not in the arena, your stool's going to fall down because everything you're trying is the ivory tower. And you might as well make breakfast with a chocolate frying pan. It's just not going to work. If you have the theory leg and you have the experience leg, but you don't have the history leg, then your stool is going to fall down because you are going to go hook, line, and sinker into all sorts of fads. And I remember lots of fads when I was growing up. The 1 minute manager, management by objective. My personal favorite, management by walking around, as opposed to management by sitting on your butt. Super leadership, good to great, all of these different fads that have sort of, that come and go because they cannot stand the test of time. And then finally, if you have the history leg and you've got the experience leg, but you don't, you don't read about, leadership ideas and philosophy, then you're going to be all tactics and no strategy. You're like the person who plays chess one move at a time. And if you're up against somebody who knows the Queen's Gambit, you're going to lose every single time. So having the big ideas is important too. And the way I've organized the book is in those three, those three sections. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the reason why looking at historical leaders is so important, even if the context is different. The principles, the lyrics rhyme, and one of the things that great organizations, great leaders throughout history have had are, I call the ABCs of high performance. So accountability, buy-in, and clarity.
So let's talk a little bit about accountability, because that's one thing that I see over and over again when it comes to leaders. It's hard to hold people accountable sometimes. We feel like we're hurting people's feelings. We're stifling their creativity. There's all kinds of, excuses that you hear from leaders when it comes to the lack of holding employees and other leaders accountable for, really, quite frankly, their job. What are some things that you have for helping us be accountable, but also hold people accountable?
Yeah, I think the number one problem leaders have is that they're lazy about accountability, and I'm gonna break that down a little bit. The part of the reason why we're lazy at accountability is we only think to hold people accountable when there's a major skill breakdown. Mm-hmm. And it's like, a 12-year-old can figure out that there's a skill breakdown in your company. A 12-year-old can figure out that this process just simply didn't work, that this relationship came off the rails. And if you are trying to hold accountability, if your definition of accountability is, punishing people, correcting people, admonishing people after a mistake has been made, then first of all, that's lazy. And second of all, you failed 80% of the way, because where you want accountability is, we call in the military, you want that accountability to the left of the boom. So before the boom happens, before the incident happens, before the problem happens, rather than afterwards. So if we just focus on afterwards, that's lazy accountability. Accountability is really about shaping desired behavior. Accountability is about building the right habits so that people succeed. I don't know if you have kids, John, or if you've ever taught a kid to ride a bike.
I do. I have 3 kids, and some have learned to ride the bike pretty quickly, and other ones have struggled.
Right. Okay, so this is a perfect scenario. When you were teaching your kid to ride a bike, were you screaming at them like every time they fell down, like, why are you so bad at this? Why are you screwing up? Or did you do that? Or did you do something else?
Well, I did something
And
else. I tried to be encouraging and try to make it fun for them and try to let them know that everybody falls and it's okay. And let's try to lean the other way when you feel yourself falling. Teach them the techniques of where to put your feet and how to hold the handlebars and things like that.
Boom. You're showing them what right looks like, and you're encouraging them along the way to do what right looks like. And so you're saying, keep pedaling, keep the handlebars straight, look to where you want to go. You know, keep your back straight. I mean, you're encouraging them to do all of these things that are helping them to be successful riding a bike. If it was just about scolding somebody after they fell down, they're never going to learn to ride a bike. And it's the same reason why leaders have such a hard time with accountabilities. They're focusing on the wrong end of it. 80% of accountability ought to be celebration. Hey, Joan, you are pedaling exactly right. Keep pedaling, keep doing it. You're doing it exactly right. Jimmy, keep the handlebar straight, keep your back straight. Oh, that's perfect. You're doing exactly right. You want to be specific on the behaviors that you want people to to adopt, the skills that you want them to perform. And the more specific you are about those things, the more that they are going to to do it right. And then you're also going to notice, just like you noticed, when they're leaning too far in one direction or another, you're going to notice when the breakdowns start to happen and be able to correct those. And it's much easier to say, Jimmy, lean the other way or keep your back straight, than it is to, pick Jimmy up and deal with the scraped knee and the scratched bike and all of that after the fact. So leaders, when you really know your people and you're focused on accountability, then not only are you encouraging the things that they're doing really well, because you want to keep that up and you want to make that very specific, you're also noticing the subtle things that might lead to problems later, and you're just nudging those in the right direction. And that is far easier. That is far easier and far more effective than the lazy accountability of writing somebody up after they've made a mistake.
Yeah, it sounds like, in order to truly hold people accountable and be the leader that holds people accountable, you need to be in constant conversation and communication, helping people along the way. And there shouldn't be any surprise like failures that you weren't aware that could be coming, because you were aware of it, ahead of time, and you were coaching and teaching along the way, not waiting for that disaster to happen.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I like to talk about the three, the three C's. So helping you, what you said is exactly right. We want to be encouraging people along the way. We want to show them what right looks like, encourage that behavior. So we're all about shaping behavior and building habits. That's accountability. And a good way to remember accountability and to diagnose it is three C's. Those three C's are clarity, consistency, and consequences. So clarity, people have to be clear on what right looks like. They have to be clear about the expectations. They have to be clear on what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about some good techniques about clarity here in a minute. Second, you've got to be consistent. It can't be you're all screaming on Monday and you're all pats on the back on Tuesday and you're apathetic on Wednesday. You've got to be consistent. And then third, consequences. You've got to the consequences have got to be there. And in this case, the consequences are, hey, you're pedaling exactly right. Don't keep your back straight. Don't lean too far to the left or to the right. Keep your back straight so you're nudging those behaviors in the right direction. And it's like a 3-circle Venn diagram, if you will. So you've got to have all three: clarity, consistency, and consequences in order to have accountability. So if you've got clarity and consistency, but you don't have any consequences, and then you're going to get drift. People are going to start to backslide because they don't really know what you want, or there's no consequences. Excuse me. If you're in circle number 2, where you've got clarity and consequences, but you've got no consistency, then people are going to think your standards are arbitrary, and they're going to get very, very frustrated. He's on his meds today, not on his meds. Why is it that this was important yesterday and it wasn't important today? And then third, if you have consistency and consequences, but you got no clarity, then you just got people wandering around in the dark. They don't know what's expected of them, and so they're just not going to be able to perform, and they're just going to be buffeted between compliments on one side and shocks on the other, but they're not going to know what's important to you. So if you're having problems in accountability, and workplace accountability, then the 3 C's are a great diagnostic tool. Are the expectations clear? Am I being consistent about how I enforce and reinforce those expectations? And are the consequences clear? And if you're having poor accountability, chances are you've got a breakdown in one of those 3 C's.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen all 3 of those kind of break down in different levels, and it usually comes like where first, the clarity is not there, and then once you learn to give more clear instructions and expectations, more expectations and outcomes than instructions, I guess you would say, because we're more focused on what is the expectation, and once you develop that part, then I see a lot of leaders fall into the part where they're not consistent, right? They have all the best intentions. We set up regular one-on-ones, but then we start canceling them. Things come up, we delay this one, we cancel this next one, and then we get out of that consistency part, and things aren't consistent anymore. We're not constantly reinforcing and reclarifying and adjusting to change. We're just kind of giving up on things. And then also the third one, consequences. A lot of us are afraid to give consequences. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We don't want to give that negative feedback. And we kind of just want to there wasn't that big of a problem this time when they missed their date, so we're just going to let it slide. And then eventually it builds up and boom, like you said, the left of the bomb, right?
Right. And you're exactly right. And it's so much harder to deal with things after a meltdown than if you're just dealing with the little nudge in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And most of these things, and I'm glad you brought up weekly check-ins. I mean, most of these things, most of these corrections or deviations, or most of these deviations can be adjusted, can be nudged in the right direction in weekly check-in. And if you're a leader, you ought to be able to spend 15 minutes once a week with each of your direct reports and just ask them 3 or 4 very simple questions. What are your priorities for the week? How are you using your superpowers? How are you using your natural talents, to achieve these priorities? In what ways could we be using your natural talents better? And what resources and guidance do you need from me to be successful in this particular task or these sets of priorities? If you ask just those 4 basic questions once a week, it is going to enrich your relationship with that employee. You're going to notice when things might be a little bit out of kilter, but 80% of accountability is celebration. So you're going to notice all of those things that, hey, that's exactly right about the 3 priorities. And I love what you're doing, using your natural ability to your detail orientation to make sure that we've got exactly the right systems and processes to make all this happen. What's the support that you need? What resources, what guidance do you need to be successful? And you do those things, you have those conversations once a week, and you are going to find that the amount of time that you have to spend in problem solving, in dispute resolution, in failure work, and corrective action goes down dramatically. So you don't think you have time for that? Well, you're consuming all of your time in problem solving, in dispute resolution, in failure work, and corrective action. And if you just do a little bit of this preventive action, 15 minutes with each direct report, you're going to find you got much more time and bandwidth to focus things on growth and innovation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Because if you can't have those conversations with your direct reports because you're, quote, too busy, then that's a sign you're not delegating enough to those direct supports. And you're not communicating enough with them so that they can take things off of your shoulders. And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges that I had to learn as a new manager or leader was the fact that I didn't scale. And when you
Right.
get yourself out of the way and realize that if you want a team that scales, you can't be the bottleneck for that team.
Yeah, you are exactly right. And so often leaders believe that everything is everything has to go through them. They have to have their hands on everything. Whenever you hear the term hands-on leader, I mean, it's like nails on a chalkboard, because that's somebody who is just going to micromanage. I like to say it's eyes on, hands off. And if you take an eyes on, hands off approach to leadership, where you are setting clear expectations, we should talk about clarity in just a minute. When you're setting clear expectations, people understand the boundaries that you've given them to operate in. You don't have to put your hands on everything, because you're right, you don't scale. You don't scale beyond your ability to put your hands on something. But if you're eyes on, hands off, you can scale, and people are going to amaze you with their ingenuity.
Yeah, definitely. Can you let's talk about clarity a little bit then. So how is it that we can be more clear with our expectations and things as a leader?
There are two key words to clarity: so that. And if you can create so that discipline in every instruction, every bit of guidance that you give, then you are going to see performance and innovation increase dramatically in your organization. So you want to give guidance. Here's what I want you to do, or here's what we need to do as a team, so that we get these results and outcomes. And by applying the so that, it's a forcing function for you to say, here's what I want to achieve by doing X, Y, or Z. Here are the results and outcomes I want to achieve by doing this. And so your subordinates are going to understand what you want to accomplish. I mean, so often we give instructions, we give tasks, but we don't give the so that. And so people are wondering, well, I don't get it. What are we trying to achieve here? Or they know a better way to do something, but because they don't know what you're trying to get at, they're just going through the motions. They're just in compliance behavior. They're just doing what they're told, and then waiting for more instructions, rather than understanding what is it that that you want to impact. So that those two words are vital to connecting the task to what you want to accomplish. That's the connective tissue.
So it sounds like that. So that kind of ties back in that why that we were talking about before, and how to get that why, why we're doing this. It kind of gives you that extra clarity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that is a more specific way of saying why.
Yes.
Why often can create emotion. Why often can lead you in bad directions. The why is because I told you so. And you hear this kind of stuff all the time. I hear this stuff all the time with leaders. Like, no, wait a minute. All right, what is it that you want them to accomplish? Okay, so put this in. Here's what I want you to do, so that these results and outcomes. And it's like these big light bulbs come on. And if you can't give a compelling so that, then probably the task that you're giving somebody isn't very important. It's not important enough for them to do. So it's a good accountability for the leader too, to make sure that those so that's are always tied to important results and outcomes.
Yeah. And from a software development side, we use the so that when we're writing our user stories. So we say, like, as a user, I need to blank so that blank. So all of our user stories have that embedded in them so that it kind of gives them that little bit of clarity of why we're doing things, which also inspires a little bit of creativity from the developer side point, because now that you know what the end game is, maybe the way that we wanted you to do it isn't the best way. And you can use some creative mindset to think about like, okay, well, this is the outcome that they want to get to. This is a much shorter path to get there. Let me build it this way instead of the way that you said.
Right. Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. And you can also help use so that's to help connect people with the work and connect the work to people. So have you ever heard of the bricklayer story?
No, tell me the bricklayer story.
Okay, so the bricklayer story is that there are three bricklayers. And a consultant like me walks by the first bricklayer and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the bricklayer says, I'm laying bricks." Okay. Walks to the second bricklayer. He says, "What are you doing?" And the second bricklayer says, "I'm building a cathedral." And then I walk to the third bricklayer. "What are you doing?" And the third bricklayer says, "I am bringing people closer to God." Now, one moral of the story on that is, well, the third person clearly knows his why or her why. I would say, maybe all three of them do. Because the first bricklayer, he's doing the job, and maybe he just loves to lay bricks. And I lay bricks because that's my skill. So I lay bricks so that I can use my skills so that I can put food on the table. He doesn't need any bigger, loftier purpose. This person just wants to put food on the table, and that's good enough. And using their skills and being in a positive environment. I love who I work with. That keeps the person on the job and focused and engaged. The second person, she just loves to build beautiful things. And so that is, I like creating beauty. And being a bricklayer helps me to create beauty. And so you connect to that. The third person, maybe is a religious person. I like to bring people closer to God. And so you're connecting that to somebody's bigger sense of life purpose and mission. All three are just fine. All three are going to keep your people engaged. You just got to know what's important to them. And if you can connect the work to what's important to them and connect what's important to them to their work, then you're going to have employees who are engaged and productive and are going to stand with you through the long haul.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good story, and I like to hear that. One thing I have some more questions about when it comes to understanding that why and building that in there. What do you do if you have people on your team that maybe just don't get it? You're not quite connecting with them. What is it? Where is it in your responsibility to get them there?
Yeah, every time there's been a breakdown, and I've been leading people and teams for 30 some odd years. 90% of the time when a breakdown occurs, the responsibility is like right in the mirror. It's like, It's because I was not clear. That's why the breakdown occurred. So I can have all the sort of meltdowns I wanted, but at the end of the day, it's as Michael Jackson would say, it's the man in the mirror. So the number one thing is, very clear expectations. So there's direct correlation between expectations and results. And if you can give very clear guidance, here's what I want here's who is responsible, what you are responsible to do, so that you get these results and outcomes, and by when. Then if you've met all of those boxes, who is responsible, who's got the rose pinned on them, what you want them to do, the results and outcomes, the so that's you want them to achieve, and then fourth, the by when. If you give instructions like that with that level of discipline, with that level of precision, you're going to have clarity. And then what you want them to do, especially when you have a new employee or a young employee, somebody who's new on the job, you haven't built that trust yet, just have them back brief you. In your own words, tell me what tell me what you're going to do and how you plan to go about it. And if the person can repeat that back to you very clearly, what your expectations are, and talk you through the basics of how they want to go about doing it, then you've got good clarity. You've got good two-way communication. You've got good clarity. With more experienced employees, people that you've built trust around, you just give the same disciplined instructions. Here's who's responsible to do what, so that, and by when. And then what you do is you give them boundaries. So every organization's got financial boundaries, legal boundaries, ethical boundaries, boundaries in terms of equitable treatment within the workplace. Whatever those boundaries might be, those are 4 examples. Anything inside of those boundaries, that's your dance floor.
Mm-hmm.
And you do anything you want in the dance floor. You do the salsa, you do the tango, you do whatever inside that dance floor. And you accomplish the mission the best way you see fit. When you start coming close to the boundaries, that's when you need to talk to me about getting more resources, getting more guidance, whatever. When you come close to those boundaries is the time when you need to get me involved so I can make sure that you're successful. I can make sure that those boundaries don't get crossed, because when the boundaries get crossed, then I've got to get personally involved. And chances are it's personally involved in problem solving and doing failure work. So if you just define those boundaries and give people agency within those boundaries, again, as you pointed out, they're going to amaze you with their ingenuity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really awesome. Tell me a little bit about. I want to shift gears here just a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the Saber 6 Foundation and this Fallen Hero ride that I know you're going to be going on later this year.
I appreciate you asking me, John. So 6 of my soldiers were killed in action in Afghanistan in 2007, and one of the deadliest places on the planet at that time. And I have always wanted to do something to commemorate their service and sacrifice, and also to help my veterans and their families and their descendants to achieve their dreams. I mean, we all went to places like Afghanistan, and soldiers throughout American history have gone to war so that Americans can pursue their dreams in peace and safety. And I want the people that we served with in our unit to know that somebody's got their backs, know that somebody's going to help them achieve their dreams. And so those 2 things inspired me to do what I calling the Fallen Hero Honor Ride, which is a 1,700-mile bicycle ride to visit the graves of the 6 paratroopers from our unit who were killed in action in Afghanistan, and to raise funds for the Saber 6 Foundation, which helps my unit's veterans, their descendants, our Gold Star families, their descendants achieve their dreams. So we'll start at Chris Pfeiffer's gravesite on September 25th, which is 15 years to the day that he died of wounds. He'll there, and that's in Spalding, Nebraska. His parents will be there. His widow Karen will be there, and also his daughter Peyton, who was born 2 days after Chris died of wounds. So they'll be there, and we'll go from Spalding, Nebraska, and make our way east, to visit different grave sites, and end up in Arlington National Cemetery, where Tom Bostic, who was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for heroism, our country's second highest medal for valor, is buried there in Section 60 at Arlington Cemetery.
That's awesome. And when you're doing something like this, like how much training goes into this, and what kind of, because that's a long way, and it's very noble and honorable, and we definitely I'm sure the whole audience will agree with me when we say we thank you for your service and for the ultimate sacrifice that these men have paid. But what kind of training goes into doing something like this?
Right. It's a lot because I've got to average. I'm giving myself 27 days, so I've got to average about 75 miles a day, and that's no small task. So some days
It's not.
flat it out. Some days are like 108 miles is my biggest one, and other days are in the 40s and 50s. So a little bit of a break there, but I did the same thing. I encourage leaders to do so. First of all, I went out. I didn't have a bike. I had ridden a bicycle in 20 years, so I had to go buy a bike. So I got a nice bike, spent enough on it that I knew I was invested. I hired a cycling coach to help me do the right things the right way, to put me on the shortest path to success. Mm-hmm. I could read all of the cycling books I wanted, but nobody ever trained for a bicycle ride this way successfully solely by reading a book or watching some TikTok videos. So I wanted to get professional help that is going to shorten my path to success. So I hired a cycling coach, and then accountability. I started telling people so I don't chicken out, and that's how I'm preparing for it. So I've been training for over a year now. Did 100 miles on Memorial Day in honor of our 6 fallen paratroopers, and my coach has been, he's been doing all the things to keep me accountable. So the encouragement, the pats on the back, you're doing this exactly right. And the occasional kick in the butt.
Awesome. I think that's awesome. How can the audience help out with this, and how can they learn more about you and pick up a copy of your book and connect with you online?
Sure. So my website is strategicleadersacademy.com. So that's strategicleadersacademy.com. And then you can see everything that we do to help people and organizations be more awesome on that website. The book, Leadership, the Warrior's Art, is available anywhere you can buy fine books. So bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, et cetera, and so forth. That book is the second edition. It's been in continuous print for over 20 years. Over 60,000 people are using it to develop themselves and their leaders. So we're very proud of that. And then in terms of the Fallen Hero Honor Ride, you can go to the website honorride.us. That's honorride, HONORRIDE.us. And then you'll see our landing page there. And I've also got a link to it, to the Sabre 6 Foundation on the Strategic Leaders Academy website.
Awesome. And I'll link all up in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go to it that way as well. And Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed talking to you.
I really appreciate being on here, John. Thanks for everything that you're doing to help tech leaders thrive.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.